Good morning, friends. In this video, we'll discuss the part 3 business communication solution. So, as I have made the part 1 video and part 2 video, this both video consists up to chapter 20, but in this video, I will discuss chapter 21 business ethics and up to the last chapter, and this video is going to be the last video for business communication. So, chapter 21 Business Ethics. What is business ethics? Business ethics are the code of behavior that a business follows in its everyday operation. Our business ethics are moral principles that guide a business behavior. It has both normative and descriptive dimensions as a corporate practice and a career specialization. The field is primarily normative. Academics attempting to understand business behavior employ descriptive methods. The range and quality of business ethical issues reflects the interaction of profit behavior with non-economic concerns. Many businesses have gained a bad reputation just by being in the business. To some people, businesses are interested in making money, and that is the bottom line. It could be called capitalism in its purest form. Making money is not wrong in itself, it is the manner in which some businesses conduct themselves that brings up the question of ethical behavior. The pure market theorists disapprove welfare capitalism and argue that all actions are inspired by social responsibility rather than attempting to maximize profit. Milton Friedman does not consider the possibility that stockholders might prefer to receive lower dividends but live in a society with less pollution or less unemployment and fewer social problems. Business managers have responsibility to all the groups of people with an interest in the firm. This will include suppliers, customers, employees, and the local community as well as the stockholders. Here are three good reasons why social responsibility and ethics are important in the business. First, people want to buy from ethical business. People want to work for ethical business. People want to invest in ethical business. So today, consumers, employees, and business owners are becoming very aware of the many social and ethical issues that abound in today's world. While talking about business ethics, normally flowing statements come in one's mind depending on what he or she perceives business ethics. Business in businesses apply on personal ethics standard when doing businesses. Ethical obligation is to act within the law, maximize profit because shareholders expect high return. A company has responsibility to its stakeholders. So chapter 21 ended up to here. Now moving toward chapter 22, the role of government. What is the current economic situation in your country? What can you do to improve the current situation in our country? Answer will be like this. Nepal's economy largely a subsistence as well as high-cost economy with no direct access to sea for expanding international trade, a limited transit facility, rising interest rate on lending, high tax burden, and costly doing businesses in passing through a downsizing phase. Circumscribed by poverty and stagnation. Agriculture is the biggest but subsistence sector of the economy, where still more than 70% of the total population derive their livelihood directly from the agriculture, encapsulated by a staggering magnitude of disguised unemployment, mounting rural indebtedness, and a high incidence of poverty. The contribution of manufacturing sector has been compressed to less than 6% of GDP in the recent years. The major problems associated with Nepalese economy are poor industrial relation, lack of investment-friendly environment, sluggish in economic growth rate, poor governance, rampant corruption, high cost economy, diminutive budget estimation and underspending, a lack of enduring peace and stability, prolonged liquidity crisis, political entrenchment, inadequate infrastructure, rigid labor laws, frequent banda and strikes, etc. The macroeconomic indicator exhibit that Nepal's merchandise exports to India were says rapidly decline over the years, resulting in a huge trade deficit. The share of trade with India alone is as high as 60%, which is evident of increasingly dependency with India. In recent times, an RB sold US dollar 2.64 billion to Reserve Bank of India (RBI) for meeting requirements of Indian currency in Nepal equal to INR 178.1 billion. This is further magnification of growing dependency with India. The following things can be done to improve current economic situation in our country. First, creating employment opportunity to transfer excessively dependent population from agriculture to more productive or non-agriculture sector. Effectively integrating Nepal's economy through trade and investment, especially with neighborhood economies, regional as well as global economies, and maximize benefit from the globalization. Third, imposing high import tax to reduce high import and high tax subsidy to promote export. And the last one is creating investment friendly environment by ensuring peace and stability and improving industrial relation, etc. So now moving toward chapter 23, central banking, money and taxation. Question number 1. What are the functions of central bank? What are the arguments of making central bank independent from the government? Answer. Central bank is the supreme monetary authority of a country that manages state's currency, money supply, and interest rates. Central bank also usually oversees the commercial banking system of a country. The major functions of central banks are fairly discussed below. First, issuing note or currency. The central bank possesses a monopoly on increasing the nation's monetary base and usually prints the national currency. This is the primary function of any central bank. Second, government bank. The central bank works as the banker agent and advisor of the government. It maintains government's account, manages public debts, and even offers advice to the government in the formulation of fiscal, monetary policy, and economic planning. Third one is bankers bank. The central banks works as the banker of other banks, the right of supervision and control on other banks, including commercial bank for the sound development of the banking system in the country, lie with central bank. Fourth is lender of the last resort. The central bank is the lender of the last resort. The central bank provides loan to the other banks at the time of financial crisis when they cannot get the loans from money market. Central bank provides such resort in the following ways: by rediscounting bills or purchasing government securities, by providing loans against the short-term securities, and the fifth one is control of credit. The credit will have to be controlled for price stability. If inflation is caused by the expansion of credit, the central bank excuses credit and vice versa. Change in bank rate, cash reserve, open market operation, etc. are the methods of credit control. And the sixth one is exchange rate supervision. The central bank formulates and implements foreign exchange rate policies, manages foreign exchange reserves, and makes transactions in foreign exchange. Other functions of central banking include the following: clearinghouse function, development function, maintain relationship with international agencies, and the last one is publicity, publishes reports, journal, and bulletins. The arguments for making central bank independent from the government are as follows. First, governments that control central banks have often used their power to increase the money supply and create information instead of reducing inflation. Independent central bank is supposed to prevent governments from inflating the money supply and in other ways creating monetary mischief. The top leaders misuse the bank's power in order to promote their short-term political gain. If central bank is not independent from government, it seems that independent central banking leads to better economic outcomes because central bankers need to be judged rather than politicians. And the fifth one is central bank meet its responsibility for transparency and accountability if it is dependent from the political leaders. Question number 2. As a present and future taxpayer, do you prefer direct or indirect taxes and progressive or non-progressive taxes? Answer: the tax is a compulsory charge imposed by the government to the peoples and institution. The people do not receive direct benefit for the tax payment. The tax is compulsory in the sense that nobody can reject to pay the tax. It is the main source of government revenue. The taxes levied on the basis of incidence and impact is called direct or indirect taxes. The tax which cannot be shifted to other the taxpayer bear the burden is called direct tax. The incidence and impact of this tax fall on the same person. Example: income and property tax. On the one hand, such tax provides quality in a sense that more burden falls on the affluent ones and less on the poor. On the other hand, it kills the spirit of people to work more, earn more, and save and invest more. The taxpayers may submit the wrong records in the tax office and conceal actual income for tax evasion. Whereas the tax whose burden can be shifted to other is called indirect tax. If a tax is levied on one person but is paid by other person, either fully or partially, it is called indirect tax. Example: sales tax, excise duty, export and import taxes, etc. These taxes are shifted to the customer by adding in the price of goods and services. So paying the tax is the convenient tax. Convenience since tax is paid by the customers while purchasing products. It is also difficult to evade the indirect tax. Thus, I would prefer indirect tax, which is convenient to pay. However, both direct and indirect taxes are compulsory. If the rate of tax rate changes with change in income, it is called progressive tax. So the rich should pay more and the poor should pay less. This tax is very popular in developing countries like Nepal. The taxpayers are classified on the basis of income and the income tax is levied. If the high rate of tax is levied on the poor and lower rate is levied on to the rich, it is called regressive or non-progressive tax. It is done to reduce more consumption made by the poor and to invest capital funds of rich. However, it creates income inequality and make injustice. This tax is impractical and inappropriate in countries like Nepal. The following table shows progressive and non-progressive tax system. Income, progressive tax, non-progressive tax, tax amount you can see there. And in this case, I will prepare progressive tax system. So moving to our chapter 25, business cycle. Question number 1. Explain the business cycle. Answer: business cycle is also known as economic cycle, and business cycle refers to economic wide fluctuation in production, trade, and economic activities in general over several months or years in an economy. This fluctuation occur around a long term in growth trend and typically involve shifts over time between periods of relatively rapid economic growth and period of relative stagnation. Business cycle is divided into four phases, which is also shown in the figure below: prosperity, regression, depression, and recovery. So first one is prosperity phase. It is the phase of expansion or boom or upswing of the economy where there is an expansion of output, income, employment, prices, and profits. There is also rise in the standard of living. The features of prosperity are high level of output and trade, high level of effective demand, high level of income and employment, rising interest rates. Large expansion of bank credit and inflation, high level of MCE, marginal efficiency of capital and investment, full employment and maximum production. There is upswing in an economic activities and economy reaches to peak. This is also called boom period, recession phase. So the turning point of prosperity to depression is termed as recession phase. The feature of recession are economic activities slow down, steady declines in output, income, employment, prices, and profits. Demand and investment falls. Pessimistic businessman with low level of confidence. Contraction of bank credit, etc. And next one is depression phase. When there is a continuous decrease of output, income, employment, prices, and profits, there is a fall in the standard of living, and depression sets in. The features of depressions are fall in volume of output and trade, decline in consumption and demand, deflation, overall business pessimism, fall in income and rise in unemployment, fall in interest rate and EC, marginal efficiency of capital and bank credit, contraction of bank credit, underutilization of resources. The aggregate economic activities is at the lowest, causing a decline in prices and profit until the economy reaches its through that is low point. And the last one is recovery phase. The turning point from the depression to expansion is termed as recovery or revival phase. The features of recovery are rise in economic activities, production and investment increases, steady rise in output, income, employment, prices, and profits. Bank bank expand credit, consumption and demand rises, businessmen gain confidence and become optimistic. Revival slowly emerges into prosperity and the business cycle is repeated. Now, question number two, explain the theories of business cycle. There are basically two theories of business cycle. Internal theory, which is also called endogenous theory, and the second one is external theory. It is also called exogenous theory. Internal theory. This theory considers business cycle to be self-generating, regular, and indefinitely repeating. A country's output, investment, unemployment, balance of payment, interest rate, and so on, all dependent on millions of decisions by consumers and industrialists on whether to spend, borrow, or save. The business cycle results from one's optimistic or pessimistic expectation. Example, when economic times are good or when people feel good about your future, they spend. But if people are worried about the possibility of losing their jobs in near future, they tend to consume less and save more. Investment is closely linked to the consumption and only takes place when demand and output are growing. Consequently, as soon as demand stops growing at the same rate, even at a very high level, investment will sorry even at the high level investment will drop, probably leading to a downturn. Downsizing also occurs when demand is strong and prices can be easily put up, and profits are increasing because in this situation, employees will begin to demand higher wages and salaries. As a result, employers will either reduce investment or start to lay off workers. External exogenous theory. This theory looks for the causes outside the economy, activities like scientific advances, natural disaster, election, or political stocks, demographic changes, and so on. Joseph Stumser believed that the business cycle is caused by major technical innovations which leads to the period of creative destruction. A simple theory is that where there is no dependent central bank, the business cycle is caused by governments beginning their period of office with a couple of years of austerity programs followed by the tax cuts and monetary expansion in the 2 years before the next election. And now moving toward chapter 26, Keynesianism and monetarism. Question number one, where when there is high unemployment during a recession, should the government intervene in the economy to create jobs? There are various economic arguments against such governmental interventions. Monetarist instates that money is neutral, meaning that is in the long run, change in the money supply will only change the price level and have no effect on output and employment. So they argued that government should abandon any attempt to manage the level of demand and employment in the economy through fiscal policy. On the contrary, governments should try to make sure that there is constant and non-inflationary growth in the money supply. Monetarists argue that recessions are caused by short-run errors, that is, but not by long-run failures by firms and workers. Why do not reduce their prices and wages weekly enough when demand falls? When economic agents recognize that prices and wages have to fall, the economy will come back to normal. But I highly support Keynesianism. Keynes believe that if people are worried about the possibility of losing their jobs in the near future, they will probably start saving money and consume less, which will lead to fall in demand and consequently in the production and employment. People's saving will remain unused, but as the classical economics theory states, in the long run, excess saving would cause interest rate to fall and investment to increase again. However, Keynes simply disagreed and said, in the long run, we all are dead. The Keynes therefore recommended governmental intervention in the economy to counter the business cycle. During an inflationary boom, the government could decrease their spending or increase taxation. During a recession, on the contrary, they could increase their expenditure or decrease the taxation or increase the money supply and reduce the interest rates so as to stimulate the economy and increase output, investment, consumption, and employment. Keynes also argued that due to multiplier effect, even a small amount of additional government spending or an increase in private investment causes output to expand by an amount greater than itself. Monetarists assume prices and wages to be flexible enough, but new Keynesians argue that wages are inflexible because of labor union contracts, government regulation quickly because they do not have perfect information, and there are also many costs involved. Economies can get looked into disequilibrium for long periods since the individuals and firms are unable to find the right prices that would lead the economy to rising output and high employment. Thus, unlike monetarists, Keynesians believe that there is still a role for either expansionary or deflationary government policies. So, moving to our chapter 27, international trade. Question number 1. Compare and contrast between protectionism and free trade. So, answer. Protectionism is the policy adopted by the countries to protect the domestic products and domestic industry from growing competition. Government adapt the tariff and non-tariff barriers to adopt the protectionism. On the other hand, free trade means the transaction of the goods and services between and among the countries without any barriers. If the government does not impose any kind of restriction in import and export of products between the different countries, this is known as free trade. The free trade and protectionism are two completely different trade policies. Flowing are the argument in favor of free trade policy. It encourages international specialization in products of the goods and services. It builds up the competitive capacity of the business enterprise in international markets. It widens the market for domestic products in international products. It provides maximum satisfaction to both producer and consumers. Maximum utilization of human resource, natural resources, and capital resources would be possible. It promotes friendly relation between ORB among trading countries. However, free trade is criticized on the following grounds: harmful to infant and basic industries. It may be invite unequal and unhealthy competition between developed and developing countries. It creates cutthroat competition leading to dump, etc. Now, flowing arguments are favored for protectionism policy. It protects infant industry. It believes in nurse the baby, protect the child, and free the adult. It helps to develop production capacity of weak industry in order to create more employment opportunities. It helps to promote more capital within the country. It promotes the feeling of self-dependency among the citizens. It always promotes to expand domestic market. However, protectionism is criticized on the following grounds. It may create misunderstanding between countries and also creates enmity. It makes a nation isolated from international arena of trade and commerce. No countries can be fully self-sufficient or self-dependent since no country is endowed with all kinds of resources. Now moving to our chapter 28, economics and ecology. Question number 1. What do you think of the idea of an eco-efficiency level? Eco-efficiency is the management philosophy that aims at minimizing ecological damage while maximizing efficiency of the firm's production process. And eco-efficiency level is the methodology adding the process of ecosystem Um, if eco-efficiency, which was developed by Mark Fisher. So these are things you can read here. Okay. Now, question number 2 is what do you mean by environmental pollution? Are you concentrated about the pollution and environment? What should be the role of the government and people to reduce the pollution? The answer will be like this. You can say here environment pollution up to, okay? I'm not going to study, but you can formally see this slide, and the answer stops here. Thank you, dear viewers, for watching my video. Thank you very much. And please like, share, subscribe my YouTube channel. Thank you.